It's road trip day. We've got a bunch of samples of MDF that we've been looking at for a while. I'm going to use that for a replacement set of workbenches for the workshop island. And this saw is going to get replaced, and we're going to use this MDF to do it. So today we're going to get in a Jeep. I'm going to drive down, it's about 7 hours to the distributor, do just a real brief video on the road trip down to meet the distributor of the MDF. You can answer some questions down there, load up some sheets of this color Valchromat MDF to build the new benches, and head on back. It's going to be a fun trip, and it's really beautiful weather, so it's going to be a good day to do this. I also realized that my videos are scattered. There's stuff about tractors and things about workshops and things about trailers, and this will be a fun video because I'm going to count how many different things recur from previous videos in this road trip, starting with this workbench here. These are actually much more related than they might appear at first. So anyway, thanks for watching. We're going to get started, and I'm going to start setting up for our road trip. So after a couple beautiful days of camping, we finally made it to Loyalton, California, where we found the distributor in an old sawmill, and he had started pulling out the MDF so that he could get to the stack of stuff that we were going to purchase while we were there. So Chris pulled out the forklift and got the stacks arranged, and we loaded up the material that I was going to get. I ended up getting 6 sheets of material for the workbenches and some other stuff I'm going to be working on. and I then secured that down to my trailer. And while we were there, we spent some time with Chris and asked a pretty extensive Q&A about MDF in general and colored MDF and how his process works and his distributorship. And I put that together in a separate video because Chris may want to use that on his website. So I'll link that up here on the upper side of the page. And if you want to take a look on a sort of a deep dive into MDF, that's a 25-minute video that goes into a question and answer, just about everything you might want to know about MDF to get started. And we got everything put together and, said goodbye to Chris and started heading our way back up after we did the question and answer and got our material loaded.
See you later. Thank you.
So we wouldn't do a road trip for every single material we get, but we've done a few road trips that we had some specific goal in mind, like stopping to visit something or pick something up, and it ends up taking you out of the beaten path. In this case, we went camping along the way and found 3 different campsites. The first site was sort of a big RV spot, and everybody pretty much there except for us had an RV, or very few non-RV people. The second campsite we went to was pretty phenomenal. It was out in the middle of the woods and we were the only ones there, and the neighboring campsite as we drove out also was empty, so we had that pretty much to ourselves, and that was inside of a bunch of what we think were redwood trees and ponderosa pines and a creek, and it was kind of amazing, and that was just a little bit off the road we went on. And then the third place was a hot springs that we wouldn't have probably gone to otherwise, but it was a little resort, very simple resort that had wonderful hot springs and a place to camp and a kitchen to use and everything. And so even if you account for our gas and if you account for all of the places we stayed, which all cost not too much, the campsites were practically free, we're still way ahead of what we would have spent to have somebody ship that stuff up, and we would have paid some truck driver to drive the same route, essentially, picked it up with a forklift and stuff. And I know that, we had the sort of vacation time to take 3 days and do that, or 3 nights and do that, and that wouldn't always be the case. But when you get a chance, see if you can't go pick something up. If it's, in this case, it was a 7-hour drive for us. If we have to go back and get more, I'll think twice about whether it's worth the drive down or whether I'll have somebody ship it and find a place to land it. But anyway, it was kind of a fun trip and something I would recommend you give it a try. So it's fun to stop by a web company that you draw whatever conclusion you draw from the website. Sometimes they have stock photos, sometimes they don't have photos of this facility at all. And that was the case here. We drove down, got to a really small town, and by small I mean just a few hundred people. And there was a railroad track that was obviously going to be Railroad Avenue, but we drove down that and it didn't really go anywhere. And all we saw was an abandoned mill site off in the distance. And by mill site, I mean a lumber mill, really big and in various states of disrepair. And the gentleman that we were going to meet, Chris, gave us a shout, and we picked up and he caught us right as we were showing up in town. He said, "Yeah, you go down to that mill, and that's where I'm located." And when we got there, we talked to him a little bit, and it turns out the mill had closed many years ago. It was a softwood lumber mill, and Chris was able to rent a bay there. It's a bay that used to be used for drying woods, so they use sort of a steam heat to dry the wood. So he's got this giant vault. It's got railroad tracks that run down the middle of it. It's a perfect place to store goods like he's got. And it's about we figure probably a 2.5 hour drive from his office to get there. So he comes out a couple times a week and is able to load things out with his forklift and prepare orders that are shipped out of there. It was unique, and it was kind of interesting. When I ran my company, we were selling small robotics parts, and we were selling those pretty much all over the world. And every once in a while, somebody would show up at our door and kind of walk in and look around and say, "Is this it?" Because they had, I don't know what they had in mind, but they had something different in mind. And we'd find in their parts, and they'd be on their way, and we'd chat with them, and it was kind of fun. So if you get a chance, I would also recommend not only doing a road trip, but go to somewhere where you normally order things online, and provided they're game, go visit them, and you'll probably really kind of draw a new impression on that stuff. And I know when I cut this MDF now and use it in the workshop, I'll probably treat it a little differently than I would have otherwise, because it's got a different value to me. So after we loaded up the material and drove back, watching the weather, hoping it wouldn't rain, we had an easy drive back, and in one day we were able to come back pretty readily. I'm using my little widget here to lift these super heavy panels one at a time and hoist them into the garage and get them stored away for the evening. And I can now get ready to start working on the workshop. All right, well, that wraps up the road trip to pick up the colored MDF. I've got it stored in the shop here now. I'm going to start working on the table saw. I'm going to take this table saw out as well as the router table and rebuild those into a new workstation that's going to be modular. So the workstation, the first component I'm going to build is going to be the table saw. And I've kind of learned a little bit from the earlier videos you saw. I built a workbench. I've learned about the height I want to work at. Got the drawers all figured out, got my drawer organization set up and everything. So now I want to build the first module, which will be the table saw. I've got these linear guides that I just picked up, and I find that it's way easier to work from the actual physical thing than the dimensions given on the web, because those aren't always correct, which was also true here. I've also got an Incra fence coming that I'm going to replace the fence system for the table saw, and I'll get that and sort of physically measure it before I start doing the final design. And so the next video I'll be starting to put together the workbench in the workshop series. The workshop series videos, I'm going to put a link to them here. And if you want to see the Q&A that I did with Chris, which was in depth and goes through all the different questions that I had and some of Chris's questions about colored MDF and MDF in general, I'll put those over here. If you haven't subscribed, please do, and you'll learn more about these things as we go. Thanks again for watching, and until I see you next, I'll be out building.